This meeting is being recorded. If you don't wish to be on camera, you can turn your camera off. I believe that we are still waiting for our first delegate, but Mary, I'll let you take things off.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us. We are waiting on Delegate Don Scott. We are really hoping that he can join us today. He was supposed to join us for League Day and wasn't able to make it because of committee meetings. And that happens sometimes. Maybe while we have a little extra time while we're waiting, we could give a brief report on what's happened to some of the voting and election bills that we've been advocating for. We're very pleased that SB 1245, Senator Deed's bill on voter access supports, and Van Valkenburg's bill, HB 1888, both passed all the way through. And so now they're ready to cross over to the other side. Also, Senator Vavola's bill, SB 1097, removal of the witness requirement, also passed all the way through on the Senate side. And Senator McClellan's SB 1395 on the Senate side, the Voting Rights Act, and also Delegate Price, HB 1890, passed all the way through on the House side. The constitutional amendment that was introduced by Senator Mamie Locke, SJR 272, for 100% right to vote, was amended on the Senate side by Senator Serval. He proposed, and they voted on changing the language so that people have the right to vote except for during a period of incarceration, and then once they are out of prison, then they have automatic restoration of rights. And that passed through the Senate. Of course, we're disappointed about campaign finance bills, but the one bill that Delegate Bulova introduced, HJ 526, did pass.
Excuse me, Mary, there are a couple of phones on that I don't know who they belong to. Perhaps one is Delegate Scott.
Is Delegate Scott in the House?
Thanks, sorry.
Well, good idea. We're disappointed that the National Popular Vote Compact bill was killed early in committee, SB 1101. The Broadband Access Bill by Senator Boysko, SB 1225, passed on the Senate side. So we're happy about that. Maybe I will turn it over to Julia and ask her if she has anything to add. Is Julia in the house?
Sure, Mary. I'm in the house and I'd be happy to add a few notes. The campaign finance reform, as you said, we're happy that there's been some progress in addition to Delegate Bulova's bill for a study of campaign finance, which is HJ 526. There's also a bill from Delegate Simon, the Privileges and Elections Chair on the House side, which would prohibit personal use of campaign finance funds. And that too passed the House. And in a good sign, both of them passed in block votes, bundled together with other bills, which means that they were viewed as not too controversial. So that's helpful. And now those bills are on to the Senate. And then on the broadband side, as you said, SB 1225 from Senator Boysko is doing well. And there are just a bundle of other bills on broadband. So I'm quite confident that we're going to see some progress. We have a lot of bills that we are watching on our website, but I'll mention a few of the others. SB 1413, also from Senator Boysko, SB 1334 from Senator Edwards, and HB 1923. And all of these bills have passed their respective houses and are on to the opposite chamber. And two of them are the same in both chamber, which means it's highly likely that they will become law. And that's the last two I mentioned, SB 1334 and HB 1923. Those are for pilots, expansion of these pilots that will allow electric utilities to give their excess broadband capacity for use by municipalities. So if your local town wanted to rent some broadband from Dominion, this would make it clear that that would be accepted. We have a bunch of other bills of interest, which I could go into if Delegate Scott has not arrived. But some of the ones that the League has been following with interest and that are looking, and in some cases testifying on, that are looking like they may pass because a version has passed each chamber, include the constitutional amendment for marriage equity, the bills extending health benefits for abortion coverage, the death penalty abolition bills, bills for requiring cultural competency certification of teachers, especially in history and if everyone could mute, that would be great. Bills prohibiting possessing or transporting weapons within Capitol Square and state-owned buildings. Those are the main ones that are looking very good. And so that's great news. And I think I see, I think I saw in the chat from Carol asking about updates on those constitutional amendments. So Carol, was there anything that I didn't cover that you wanted to discuss or wanted to ask about? You're so knowledgeable. If there was...
No, it was just Senator, well, there's one to make sure the length of the session is more coming on. But just Senator Sassler said there's no way we can get this business done in 30 days. So he actually has a constitutional amendment to change the length of the session. So I don't know if that's going anywhere or not. And then Senator Stanley, who always looks out for schools, has his regarding making sure that there's students have equitable opportunities. And he always talks about how sad the schools are down in his area in the Southwest. And so they had a long discussion about what was, are they looking for equal opportunities or equitable opportunities? And we can talk about that more later, but that did have some humorous exchanges on the Senate floor.
Right, I agree. And I thought that was very interesting. And he later, when they were about to vote on it, he mentioned that, and we got to witness right before that, Senator McClellan schooling him, although I'm sure he already knew, the difference between equity and equal. And she offered an amendment, which he accepted, to change it to equitable educational opportunities for all the students, because like some other states in the union, Virginia does not equalize tax funding among the jurisdictions. So if you have a wealthier area, their schools generally get better funding because it's from local tax revenues. There are other states that do provide more equitable distribution of tax funds. And so that's what Senator Stanley is trying to do. And I think it's a great amendment for geographic equity among education. The issue that we seem to be running into with the constitutional amendments, they don't want to do too many. They really only want to do 2 or 3 per year, because otherwise it looks radical to constituents if there are lots of changes in the Constitution being proposed. But as you all know, it's a 2 or 3 year process. They're supposed to introduce an amendment 1 year, have an intervening election, and then introduce it and pass it again a second year, and then it goes to the voters in a referendum, as we just saw happen with redistricting. And so for any of these constitutional amendments to pass, they'll not only have to get through both chambers, but they'll have to, and be signed by the governor, but then they'll have to do it again next year, and then have the voters pass it in a referendum. So Carolyn has asked if there's an end date for the special session, and as I calculated it, it was going to be February 28th, but Deb has advised, actually she's hearing February 27th, which makes sense because the 28th is a Sunday. So if there are any conference committees, they will need to get their work done by the 27th is what we're hearing. And on one set of our bills, the first ones that Mary mentioned, which are for absentee ballot drop off and a curing opportunity for absentee voters, those do still at the moment still have different language between the 2 bills. We like the House version slightly better. It's a little more modernizing and has a few more good bells and whistles. So if they haven't introduced a substitute by the end, they will have a conference committee. I need my second cup of coffee. They'll have a conference committee reconcile those differences. Okay, so it looks like there may be a new phone on the line. Is that Delegate Scott by any chance? Okay, Joan is saying it is not, so perhaps it is Joan. All right, just checking. Delegate Scott, if you are in the room, please speak up. Otherwise, we can talk about these great bills all day. And we do have some folks in the room who have offered testimony on the bills. So Mary, that would be another possibility. I see you possibly nodding. We could ask if you happen to have been someone who testified on a bill that you care about, it'd be really neat to hear what you were thinking about that bill as you testified.
Actually, is Tonja Roberts in the room?
I am here. Hi, everybody.
Awesome. Well, I welcome you, and I understand that you're testifying on a cultural competency bill.
Yeah.
Excuse me. First of all, I just want to introduce you. You are a member at large of the League of Women Voters Virginia, and you're
I
from
am.
South Boston. Is that right?
Yes, you got it. You got it.
Well,
Thank you.
you have the floor. Can you tell us a little bit about this bill that you're testifying for?
I will. I want to first thank everybody for extending the invitation to come and speak a little bit about the bill. It's Senate Bill 1196, and it's the Cultural Competence Bill. So I thought I'd start out with, just in case maybe there was a little bit of confusion as to exactly what cultural competence really amounts to, and why it's so important in regard to this particular bill. You may know that about a year and a half ago, Governor Northam mandated that there be a commission on African American history in Virginia in particular. And so they have been diligent, did extensive work with regard to gathering information about why African American history would even be important to single out as as a particular cultural focus and historical focus. I want to drop, if I can, in the chat, just there, if I can find it quickly, the link for the committee, because they have a Dropbox that's open to the public, and that Dropbox allows you to see all of their good work, as well as let's see, copy the link. as well as, kind of what they use to make their decisions and make their recommendations.
Tonja, I'm so sorry. Can I interrupt you? Delegate Scott has joined us, and we'll
Okay.
get back to you. And thank you so much.
No problem.
Good morning.
Good
Okay.
morning. I'm so glad you could make it.
Glad I could make it too. I was scrambling and contacting staff. I don't have a Zoom link. I registered. I never got a link. So I'm thank y'all for getting that straight for me. How y'all doing this morning?
Is from the 80th district, and I just wanted to mention that he's on the committees of Finance, Courts of Justice, and Labor and Commerce. And we're very interested in hearing about the status of bills concerning criminal justice reform. You have the floor or the room.
Well, first of all, thank y'all for having me. There are so many things that have happened. It's been a whirlwind. Good morning, I'm Don Scott, Portsmouth House. I'm representing Portsmouth House in the House of Delegates, House District 80. And I'm an attorney. I do a lot of criminal defense. I do a lot of civil rights stuff. I do a lot of, and I do some other stuff, personal injury, real estate, some other stuff. But at the end of the day, my reason for running is that I'm very interested in criminal justice reform. And I think a whole lot of folks, I see criminal justice reform probably a lot differently than other folks, having been justice involved myself, 20 some odd years ago. And so I know how difficult it is to recover from that experience, no matter what your education level is, but more so if you're poor and unfortunate if you're Black, and it just makes it that much difficult. So I look at criminal justice reform as really an economic war. It's a war around who gets opportunity. It's a war around who gets the opportunity to really, to seek out the American dream, to seek out life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And those who have been just as involved and been just in this system, they come out with an anchor and a ball and chain on their leg to keep them from moving forward towards this American dream. So when I first came in, one of the things that I wanted to do was give people the opportunity who are doing the right thing, the opportunity to come home sooner. So last session, my first session, I introduced a bill to increase earned sentence credits for everybody who was in prison, who had done what I would consider to be model prisoners, which means that they had done everything right since they'd been in and numbers were low, they hadn't had any infractions, and that they had done the things necessary to make themselves better. So when they got home, they would get released. In Virginia, you only get 4.5 days per 30 days of earned sentence credit, which is one of the lowest in the country. And so we introduced a bill to increase it. My first session, it got sent to a sentencing commission study, but during special session, I was able to bring it back and we passed it. And there are 26,000 people in the Department of Corrections. It's going to impact about 12,000 people. We couldn't get everybody because there were a lot of crimes that were excluded that I didn't want to exclude, because I didn't want to exclude anybody, because I believe everybody's redeemable. And I believe of those people, 90-some-odd% of those folks are going to come home anyway. So I wanted to give as much incentive to people to come home better and have skills, vocational skills, having gone through counseling if they needed it, substance abuse counseling if they needed it, and have good behavior while they were there, that they would get additional time off to incentivize behavior. So when they came home, they would be better citizens, because they're coming home anyway. So, but we were not able to get everybody, but we got a large chunk. And that bill takes effect July 2022, because the DOC said they needed time to redo their calibrations of their systems. This session, and we did some other stuff as well. I mean, we've done so much. I feel like I've been here forever, and I've only been here about 13 months since I was sworn in last January. This session, I'm hopeful. I'm a chief co-patron on Majority Leader Herring's bill to legalize marijuana. I don't know where you stand. I don't really care. This is a It's a smart move. We have a $1.8 billion illicit marijuana market. So for those who say, well, if we do this, people are going to start smoking, it's going to encourage them. Too late. They already are. It's $1.8 billion illegal drug market. So the question is, what do we do with it? Think how ridiculous folks sounded. And I know, though, I know nobody here enjoys a glass of wine or any other adult beverage sometimes, but think how ridiculous it sounds that you wouldn't be able to go to the ABC store and get whatever your favorite adult beverage is because folks thought that it was too dangerous. There are documented, even with the illicit drug market, even with marijuana being sometimes dangerous because people may lace it with something that they shouldn't. Marijuana has maybe 10 deaths a year that they can document, and they're weird deaths if something happened, laced or drugs, something like that. Alcohol causes 400,000 deaths per year. So we're not talking about prohibiting alcohol, but we're talking about trying to continue to keep this marijuana out of folks' hands. So we're hopeful that we will decriminalize and legalize and tax and help those communities that have been, first of all, it's gonna help the whole Commonwealth because it's gonna lift up a whole lot of folks in the economic. My whole thing before was I didn't want to legalize marijuana without having a paradigm where those people who had been impacted wouldn't be able to participate in the market. So to be able to sell, they've already proven that they can get arrested selling it. Maybe they can sell it now without getting arrested. So I just didn't think it would be right that we would slap the R of legitimacy on cannabis, and then the same companies get to come in and take over the Altrias and some of these other large cannabis companies, the Columbia Cares and all these other ones that would get to come in and take over. We're also, I saw a question pop up about mandatory minimums. We also, in the course of justice, passed and on the floor, we passed a bill to eliminate a lot of mandatory minimums. I can tell you that the House of Delegates side mandatory minimum is a little more watered down than the Senate version. It's rare that they get us on something, but on this one, theirs is a little stronger. I think we're going to come out somewhere in the middle, just to be honest. The Senate basically ends all mandatory minimums except for those, I think, for first-degree murder. And the House ends all mandatory minimums except for most of the violent offenses, so especially any sex offenses. So I think it's going to probably end up somewhere in the middle if I had to guess. I don't want to negotiate via Zoom because I know y'all recording this, but I'll probably be on the negotiation team, so I don't want to give away my position, but I think it may end up somewhere in the middle on mandatory minimums. What else are we doing? We're doing a million things. We abolished the death penalty, or at least we will. I think the governor's going to sign the bill. I think it's going to pass. And I know.
Maybe we can take a few minutes to answer some of the questions in the chat.
Sure.
Our
I'm all ears.
President Joan Port in the room.
She's there. Joan, unmute yourself.
Are there some good questions?
Yes, yes, there are. I'm sorry. Thank you. I was doing three things. There is a question about expungement, and there's a question about mandatory minimums.
So I kind of was going through the mandatory minimum. I'll pivot over to expungements.
Right.
So again, Majority Leader Herring, this is an issue that she is passionate about. It's an issue I'm passionate about as well. I have a felony conviction. Surprise, y'all, don't panic. It happened in 1994, federal case. I was in my third year of law school, and folks told me I would never be an attorney, I would never practice. Tells you what they know. But at the end of the day, you know, I continue to have to do what I need to do as we move forward. I wasn't one of the ones that were lucky enough to know President Trump and get a pardon because it was a federal offense. But expungements are important. They give people the opportunity to move on if they have actually earned it. In some effects, like right now, I help people with expungements now. You might go to court and be charged with something and that charge be dismissed. And in Virginia, you still have to apply for an expungement. You would think it would be automatic, but it stays on your record forever. So I think both bills in the matters of where they've been dismissed for some of it for the House version bill, all matters dismissed, automatic expungement. On the Senate side, he has, I think he has a combination, depending on the offense, you have to get in a petition. And when you do a petition, you have to hire a lawyer, and lawyers like to get paid. I know I do. And so, and lawyers, and that causes expense. And so for people who don't have those means, they end up not wanting to go to court because they don't want to deal with it. Last time they were in court, it did not end well, so they don't want to go to court, and so they end up just not getting it expunged. So we're hoping that we'll have a combination of, and I know that we will. Something with expungement will pass. It's going to be probably a combination of some automatic expungements for some offenses, and then a petition-based expungement system similar to one we have now for more expense for other offenses. And I believe it will end up being a combination not only of the easy ones like the lower level misdemeanors, but it will probably end up being some felonies that can be expunged, but it'll probably have to be a waiting period, which makes sense. 7 to 8 years, you haven't gotten any trouble, you've been good all this time, no problems, nothing new. You should be able to go and either have it automatically expunged for some offenses, non-violent and others, and then you should be able to go and petition the court for other offenses after a certain period, 7 years, 8 years, whatever we negotiate. I think that's the difference there's a sticking point on the number of years, and then there's a sticking point on some of the offenses that would be eligible for automatic versus petition-based versus some offenses that you just can't get expunged, which would make sense. And so that's where we are on that. I see a question about ending cash bail. I don't know what that bill is. That's not one of the ones that I've been assigned to follow closely. I'm not sure on the cash bail bill, but I can tell you that there's a strong emphasis. Cash bail is going away. It's dying a natural death, a combination. I know in some jurisdictions, they don't even ask for cash bail. They just ask for it. You're either gonna get a bail or you're not. And it's normally not a cash bail now, but so it's dying a slow death, but I think eventually it will eventually die all the way out.
Okay.
Trying to see, what else do I see? I see a question.
One more question, and then we're going to have to wrap this up.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a quick question. I know you have a committee meeting about the marijuana bill and directing the money for the sales to schools, and also making sure that minority businesses are not cut out of that.
Right. So if you get some time in your free time, read the 500-page marijuana legalization bill. But that bill, at the short version, it's about 70% of the dollar tax revenue, what I would call social equity. Some people only call it, there's a 30% piece that goes directly to what we would call social equity. That's helping folks come into the business who have been marginalized and traditionally left behind, communities of color, and those who have been impacted by the war on marijuana. They would get preference to start business. They get licensing preference. They get help financially. They start a cannabis equity fund. Then there's 40%, the way in the House version, 40% would go towards at-risk youth, 3 and 4 year olds, to get into early childhood education. To me, some people say, well, Don, that's not right. We should put 40% in just social equity, but I view that 70% pool as all social equity. When you give 3 and 4 year olds who have been at risk the opportunity to get into ahead of the game in education, then that's the best investment that you can make in social equity. So we handle both sides. We handle those that have been impacted, and we give those a future that can work. So that is why I'm excited if we do it that way, if we keep it that way. I think we have to do both so we can give those affected kids the opportunity, those disadvantaged 3 and 4 year olds, the opportunity to get into early childhood education. The earlier you get in, the more likely you're going to be a reader, the more likely you're going to be a lifelong learner. And so we have to do both of those. So I want to thank y'all for having me, and y'all keep watching us. Appreciate y'all.
Well, thank you very much, Delegate Scott, and
All
good
right.
luck with the rest of the session.
All right, pray for me. It's tough out here.
All right, is Ashna Khanna in the room?
Hey everyone, yes, I'm here.
All right, Ashna Khanna is Legislative Director from ACLU, Virginia. You have the floor.
All right, well, thank you. I'll be talking about some criminal legal reforms too, and kind of build off Delegate Scott's analysis about that as well. But we have some really exciting reforms, like he said, that is happening this year. I will say our biggest 3 priorities have been, passing the right to vote amendment, which, as you all know, is an amendment through both the House and the Senate that would allow people the right to vote who are currently incarcerated for a felony conviction, who have been previously convicted or have been judged mentally incompetent in a court of law. And so really the idea is that, you should never, your right to vote should never be taken away. And as folks know, out of privilege in elections, the committee did pass out the with Senator Locke, our right to vote amendment. However, it got amended on the floor. So right now, advocates and on the House side, it was always a restoration amendment. I think where the ACLU and other advocates are at is we're not saying we don't want anything. What we're saying is that if we're really thinking about racial justice at the ballot box, if we're really thinking about effective voting rights and making sure that we are leading the way and taking the racism and Jim Crow laws out of the Virginia Constitution and recognizing how long it takes to change the Virginia Constitution, let's get it done right the first way. So, we're asking that right to vote just never be taken away in the first place. That I would keep, today it's going to be heard. We've had some phenomenal testimony. League of Women Voters has been an essential partner in the coalition to help making this movement happen. And so it's something that I'm so very passionate about and start out with usually because it's the intersection of voting rights and criminal legal reform, but has such great implications to who has a voice for what can happen in the Commonwealth and who doesn't. And so, and obviously that has racial implications as well. And so that's one of the first priorities that I like to start out with. The second is police accountability. This is something that, Virginia needs law enforcement accountability, and we need to protect Black and Brown communities and all communities from police violence. And so police officers who use excessive force in violation of the federal Constitution are seldom held accountable for their actions. Many of them use the federal defense, even when they are brought to court, called qualified immunity as a shield from being sued by police and families they harm. And so it was time for Virginia to demand the same accountability for law enforcement officers, especially ones who have committed unconstitutional conduct. Police are not above the law and should be held accountable like any other profession in Virginia. And so, this session, there was 2 bills, some like to say end qualified immunity or, kind of allow for police accountability. And so the Senate, Senator Serval had carried the Senate version. And so what his version did was it was restricted to Senate Bill 5030 that passed this previous special session, which included deadly use of force, failure to intervene, chokeholds. And so what he said is that for all these police accountability laws that we passed this past session, let's make sure that qualified immunity cannot be used as a defense. And then we had one carried by Delegate Bourne on the House that basically said, similar to what Colorado and other states have passed, any unconstitutional conduct that happens, you get your day in court. You can take the police to court and qualified immunity will not be used as a defense. I know there's been a lot of myths of, anti-police or for police or what this bill really does. And, what we really like to stay grounded in is that it really is an accountability bill. And it's one that, sorry, my puppy is in the back. But it is accountability bill, and it's one that unfortunately died in both the House and Senate. So advocates are really upset about this. It's something that did not happen. That was probably one of the biggest reforms we saw happening in police reform, and we're hoping that it comes back the next session. And then I will, yes.
Sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt. I'm sorry, our schedule had a little bit, and you didn't get quite as much time as we were hoping, but I've just been informed that Senator Kiggans is in the room, and she is scheduled to speak next. I invite you to come back next week if you want to, and you're welcome to put anything in the chat or to send any materials to the Google Drive. You could send to our first Vice President, Joan Port.
Okay, perfect.
Thank you
Yeah,
so
so
much.
I will definitely send some materials, and then also I will send a letter that advocates had sent to all the legislators and the governor earlier this year that has to do with marijuana legalization. I know that Delegate Scott got into some of the things, but I will definitely send y'all some material and be willing to come back as well.
All right. Thank you so much, Ashna.
Thank
Good luck
you.
with the rest of the session.
Thank you so much.
Is Senator Kiggans in the room?
I am. Can you guys see and hear me? Good morning. Good morning. I apologize. We're on our way to Richmond, so we just pulled over for a few minutes. We've got we're back in special session today.
The miracle of modern technology.
It is nice, very portable these days. But thank you for letting me spend a few minutes with you all. I just wanted to talk mainly about some of my healthcare legislation that's coming up, and that we've heard some of the bills in the Senate, and then we're crossing over today, so we're starting to hear the House bills, and the House will hear our Senate bills. So, as most of you probably know, I'm an adult geriatric nurse practitioner, so I try to really stay a lot in my healthcare lane of working to advocate for nurses and for healthcare, and especially for nursing homes. I think there's a lot of room for improvement here in Virginia, and we've seen that with the COVID pandemic, just kind of the devastation that's occurred there. Last year, I had a staffing ratios bill that died and was turned into a work study to focus on recruitment and retention of nurses that work in long-term care specifically. So we actually took a few of those recommendations and turned them into bills for this session. One was increasing a nursing scholarship to try to incentivize CNAs in particular to go to school and to become nurses to then work in long-term care. We also are still working through a tax break for some nurses that work in long-term care. And then just really looking at some of their specifics. Staffing ratios was brought back again. That bill died in committee, but I do think it's just an important piece and a solution that we should consider for how to improve care for our residents in nursing homes. So that's one thing that's just really important to me. I think that anyone who is an older adult, in their life has, especially with COVID, has seen some of the challenges with visitation and special session over the fall last year. I had a visitation bill passed that we were able to require facilities to put at least a procedure in place for visitation, either virtually or in person, whatever, according to CDC guidelines. But that's such an important piece that we were missing out. And so many families and patients were in the dark just about, how they could interact and still communicate with each other. So I feel like we made some progress. We expanded that bill a little bit this session and included clergy in that piece. So now it's a requirement that clergy will also be allowed to have regular visitation with patients or residents in long-term care and nursing facilities. So those are things that are very important to me. Again, advocating for our nursing profession, but also for our older adults who are often a voiceless group in long-term care. I also had some legislation about military spouse liaison, creating a position in the Department of Veteran Affairs just to advocate for our military spouses. I was a 20-year Navy spouse. I'm a prior helicopter pilot in the Navy, but so Navy veteran, but then my husband was also active duty for 20 years. He flew F-18s when I flew helicopters. So when I got out, he stayed. So I know just the challenges of that group. And so having a person who works up in Richmond with the Department of Veteran Affairs to help just be a liaison and a point of contact for all of our military spouses out there. We have so many military spouses in the state of Virginia. So that's an important piece for me. And let's see, those are kind of my main. We also had some election accuracy where we did. I know you guys are proponents of just making sure that our voting process is as accurate as possible. I had a bill that required the Office of Vital Statistics to report, instead of monthly, they now report people who are deceased to the Department of Elections monthly, and my bill changed that to weekly. And but we have early voting and a lot of other things in place, so we just want to keep that list nice and tight and accurate. So I had a bill specifically just increasing that frequency that the Office of Vital Statistics communicated with the Department of Elections. So hoping to keep that accurate list, but again, just happy to be out there and advocating. There's not that many healthcare professionals in the Senate. We have a dentist and Senator Donovan is an OBGYN, and then I'm the only nurse practitioner in the Senate. So there's three of us who are trying to hold down the fort with a lot of the healthcare issues, but But yeah, thank you so much for having me today. I mean, I hope that kind of shed some light onto just my priorities legislatively, and looking forward to hearing some House bills, and hopefully next two weeks for session, and then wrapping it up. But I maybe have time for about one question if you got one.
All right.
We do. We have a question, a small one. How about the vaccine rollout?
That's a great question. Thank you for that. Yeah, we have worked really hard we had a great, all the healthcare. Oh, oops, I apologize. Hold on.
We can still hear you. Whoops. Hello?
Looks like the.
I'm sorry, are you still there? Sorry.
You're
There was
good.
another. But yeah, the vaccine rollout. So we had a piece of legislation that lifted barriers for people who were providers who could administer the vaccine. And that bill we had an emergency clause on it to get it passed through the Senate, and there was a House component that came over. But there's vaccines out there. They're limited. We're limited in the number of quantities that Virginia is getting. It's being distributed nationally just based off percentages of population, and then being distributed throughout Virginia to localities based on the percentage of their populations. So once we have the vaccine, the issue then became, how are we going to get it into the arms of Virginians? And the providers who were out there, I signed up for Medical Reserve Corps, but had to go through 7 online training components and in-person orientation, re-up my CPR qual. So there was a lot of processing. So we wanted to make that process easier for providers, nurses, other allied health professions to be able to join in to give that vaccine. So that was what our emergency bill did, and that should be getting signed by the governor, we hope, in the next week or so. It was a completely bipartisan bill. So which will enable us just to be able to, again, get those vaccines out into the arms quicker. It also involves medical students, nursing students, to be able to allow those guys to help out as well. But the vaccine is out there. If you are able and willing to get it, please do. I, as a primary care provider, I offer the vaccines. I'm fine. If you have an objection to it, I'm not going to, don't get it, but it is there. I think it is absolutely the best way out right now to get out of this pandemic, which I know we all want to do. So I got mine. I got my first dose of Pfizer, and then should get my second one in the next couple of weeks, just as I still practice in geriatrics. So it's important to me to be protected. But please get the vaccine if you're willing and able. And yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for having me. I have a 9:15 Zoom. We're one after another this morning, but
Well, thank you so much
appreciate it.
for joining us today, and good luck with the rest of the session.
Yeah, thanks you guys. Good. Hopefully we'll see you in person soon.
Hopefully.
All right. Take care. Have a good day. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Tonja Roberts, I would love to give you a chance to finish what you started when you were interrupted.
No worries. Thank you so much again. And what I was talking about the commission that Governor Northam had established, and he wanted haste and urgency in figuring out how we can best present, educational piece for school systems with regard to African American culture and history. And so the cultural competence piece is that, when you have someone who's in a different culture from you, that, maybe someone has a certain reaction, or maybe they stretch their eyes, or maybe they are not sure what's going on. The competence helps you to understand, or be willing to understand, or open your mind and your heart to other cultures, to other people, to understand their history. And so that's what the cultural competence piece is really all about. So studies show that the best way to do that is to be immersed in the culture so that you can understand it. And so the results of the commission studies showed that there were some shortfallings, of course, as it regarded African American culture and history. And so they had 4 recommendations. I won't go through all the recommendations, but I put their link in the chat earlier. Hopefully everyone can go there and you can see exactly what the recommendations were. But the 4th recommendation dealt specifically with professions and the professionals within our school systems. And so that recommendation said that they want development and instruction to support and equip educators to create and sustain cultural responsive pedagogy and gain appropriate fundamental knowledge in African American history. So the focus is African American history, and it's because there has been such a negative effect of African American history, falsehoods even, or watered down versions of what it is, what African Americans contributed to the history of Virginia in particular, and of course to our nation. And so this bill will require that anyone who's part of the who's an employee of a school system, they will have to, either for their certification or for recertification, they will have to have certain instruction and training as it relates to African American history in particular. If you teach history or if you teach social studies, you will have to get a specific training in that area. So that's pretty much what the bill is centered around. I put a link to the bill in the chat as well. And I think someone else had another link so that you can go there and actually see where it's going to be presented. And it's going to be, today is going to be heard as in the House Education, on the House Education Committee. So, and then the House version of it is House Bill 1904. That's kind of a quick rundown. Are there any questions or are there any additions to kind of what I've presented or what I've said? Because I know there are others in the room that can contribute.
Yeah, Tonja, there's a question. Is there anything specific that citizens can do to encourage a positive reception of this study effort?
Well, certainly, at the link for public comment, you can leave your public comment. I don't know if there's opportunity still as a citizen to have comments to testify, but certainly that's an option as well if it's still open and available. But they're also taking public comments with regard to that, and they also in the Dropbox that they have publicly made available, there's a section where they've taken public comment and they have the public comments listed there so that you can see the pros and cons and people who support and people who may not support the initiative. So and certainly get in contact with your representatives and let them know that you support this bill and you'd like to see it passed.
I need to step in and ask that you wrap this up now because we have another speaker waiting to speak. But thank you so much.
Absolutely, it's a wrap. I'm looking forward to testifying later today, and so we just encourage
you.
Thank you very much.
Next we have Galina Varchena, if she's in the room. She is with NARAL Virginia, the Policy and Government Relations Director. We would love to hear about the status of bills that NARAL Virginia is supporting or opposing. Welcome.
Hi, good morning. So to go through these quickly, because you all have a limited amount of time, and surprisingly for a short session, we have a large agenda. Last year it was like one bill, this year it's many bills. This year, one of the bills that was already mentioned is the bill to fix the problem with the state healthcare exchange, because as of right now, the exchange prohibits abortion coverage either as a part of a plan or as a separate rider, which is unusual. And we want to strike that prohibition. There's a bill carried by Senator McClellan and one carried by Delegate Hudson, and those bills have made it through their respective houses and on a partisan line, except Senator Morrissey. So we are hopeful that it will become law. Then we also are working, and I'm working on this bill, two bills actually, with Birth and Color RVA and a few other partners. One bill would start as a work group with the Board of Local and Regional Jails to study the treatment of pregnant incarcerated persons. Partly that bill kind of the origin of that was that Kenda, who is I think she's executive director or president, and I always mix those two up, of Birth and Color RVA. She is also a doula, and she works with, is working in part with like prison systems in the RVA area to start a doula program, and she works with medical professionals. And what she's heard and what we've heard from public defenders and others working in the system is that despite some of the progress that was made last year, pregnant incarcerated people are still facing a lot of barriers to get adequate care. And we would really love for the board to take a look at that, to do a study, and then hopefully once the study is done, we'll be able to come up with some legislation to help it out. That's a bill that's carried by Senator Favola. It made its way through the Senate and is now in the House Public Safety Committee. Then there's a bill to start, again, a study or a work group to do a fetal and infant mortality review team. As of right now in Virginia, we have what's the maternal mortality review team that looks at maternal deaths. We have a childhood fatality review team that looks at death that happened in childhood, but they kind of select a topic each year and look at that topic. So right now, from what I understand, they're studying childhood suicide, which doesn't cover that period of time between 20 weeks pregnant and up to 12 months, which is the period of time we're really looking at, because there are vast disparities, racial and socioeconomic, of deaths within that period. If you are a Black woman, you're 9 times more likely to lose a baby than if you are a white woman, which is just as atrocious as the disparities in maternal mortality. And you can't really look at that and fix that problem without also addressing the problem of preventable fetal and infant deaths. So, but because it's a very involved process, they need to do a work group first before setting up the actual team. That's a bill that's carried by Delegate Julia in the House. That bill passed. It's also, there's a budget amendment with Delegate Betsy Carr and Senator McClellan to fund the work group because it's such an involved process. It includes a very interdisciplinary approach. The Department of the Office of Medical Examiner needs to hire some staff to help set up and do the actual study and figure out a 5-year plan, so that hopefully next year we can come back and actually do a bill that will establish the thing and have it start doing the research. Then there's also a bill that has died in the Senate, but is still alive, lived through the House, and has made its way to the Senate. It's the bill to fix the issue of sexual harassment in the workplace. So last year, the Virginia Values Act passed, and we have the Virginia Human Rights Act, and both of those do cover workplace and sexual harassment. However, there's not an agreed upon definition that courts and advocates can look to and employers can look to. And this bill would establish a definition based on the best of federal and state precedent. It would also lower the threshold. So right now, if you are facing sexual workplace harassment and you work for someone who has fewer than 15 employees, the only time you have real recourse is if you are terminated or are constructively terminated, but you don't have real recourse if your conditions of employment change. While we would like for that to lower that to 5 employees. So if you're 5 or lower, you can also have constructive termination, and if your conditions of employment change. So from 5 to 15, we'd like to include those folks in the code to give them some recourse. We also want to expand the statute of limitations. As of right now, I think it's 180 days, but we'd love to expand it to 2 years, because if you are being sexually harassed and you lose your job or you leave your job because of that, it can be hard to find another job and also at the same time pursue a complaint, and then also potentially a civil case against your former employer within that period of time. Like I said, that bill was carried by Senator McClellan in the Senate. That died by it made it all the way through to the Senate floor from several committees, but then was referred back to, I think, Commerce and Labor on a motion from Senator Obenshain. We are hoping that the House bill that did make its way through will be able to pass. There's some doubt about that, and as always in the Senate, we have some Democrats who are very pro-business and have some concerns and have heard from the Virginia Chamber of Commerce and NFIB on some of their concerns. So that would be, if you want to support this bill, those would be Senator Chap Peterson and Senator Marsden and Senator Mason and Senator John Bell, and a few of Senator Lewis are some of the folks there. Now there is, and that in the House, that's Delegate Watts who's carrying that bill. And I have dropped, let me see, a link to our website that has the various bills. The sexual harassment bill isn't on our website. It's a bill we support, but it's not one of our like priority bills, just because we limit those to bills that directly deal with repro or more directly deal with repro. Then there's a bad bill by Senator Peake, and that's a bill that would limit the kind of communication that the Virginia Department of Health or its contractors or local departments can have with minors without the explicit consent of their parents. It sounds good, right? This bill was, well, doesn't sound good to me, but for some folks, it sounds good, because why would you want a minor to be contacted by the Department of Health without the permission of their parents? Well, there are a number of circumstances. According to our legal experts, some nurses, for example, school nurses, are, in the way that they're contracted, are contracted through the Department of Health or local departments of health. And the kind of communication they're not allowed to have under this statute would be anything that is encompassed in the realm of family life education, which covers things like sexual assault prevention, human trafficking, healthy relationships, domestic violence, all of those kinds of things. So imagine if you're a school nurse and you see that a student, you sense or see or get information that a student has either been sexually assaulted, is facing domestic violence, is otherwise, in danger. For example, because of the way this bill is written, you as a school nurse would not be able to approach that student to talk to them about those issues. And that's one kind of small example of a concern that we and folks from the Domestic Violence Alliance have about this particular bill. Unfortunately, it's made its way through the Senate. It made its way on into the House. So we are hoping to defeat it in the House. The three senators who voted for that bill that was a bit surprising were Senator Lewis, Senator Peterson, and Senator Morrissey. We think that there's some fundamental misunderstanding kind of about the potential broader impact of that particular piece of legislation. So I think that might be, one last thing, and this one's not controversial, but as of right now in Virginia, if you are a person who gets their insurance through the private market, the law states that passed in 2017 that you should be able to get 12-month birth control at a time. If you are in Medicaid and you get your birth control from your providers, so you go to a doctor and they have prescribing authority and they can also dispense, they can give you 12-month birth control at a time and your Medicaid will pay for it. But if you go to a provider who can't give you 12-month birth control and you have to get a prescription, you have to go to a pharmacy, and you can only get, prior to the pandemic, it was 30 days. Right now, I think it's 90 days birth control at a time. There's a plethora of studies that show that if you have 12-month birth control at a time, that significantly increases adherence to the regimen, that significantly decreases the possibility of unplanned pregnancy or decreases the possibility of an abortion. I think unplanned pregnancy like by 30%, unplanned abortion, well, not that anybody plans an abortion, but of an abortion by like 40%. So and it passed on a bipartisan basis through the Senate, I think unanimously, if I'm not mistaken, and we are hopeful it will pass through the House. There is a budget item in the governor's budget that pays for this expansion for like everyone on Medicaid to be able to get 12-month birth control at a time, if that is the appropriate thing for them as decided.
Galina,
Yep.
Thank you so much, but maybe you could just answer the question about the number of the bad bill. Do you happen to know the number?
Yes, I do. Let me pull it up because I'm numerically dyslexic. I don't always remember. It is, uh, 1 second, get it.
Well, when you find it, could you put it in the chat? And unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap this up because we've gone a little bit over time, but thank you so much for joining us.
Sure, it's SB 1235.
Awesome. My apologies to Carol Noggle. I had asked if she could talk a little bit about 2 of Senator Stanley's bills. I'm afraid we're out of time. And if Deb Wake, our president, is still in the room, would you like to say a few words before we close?
I'd like to thank everyone for joining us again this week. Because we have a special session called, we will continue these for the next 2 Wednesdays. So stay tuned, same time, 8:30 on Wednesdays. And we hope to be sending you some action alerts on some bills that need your advocacy. If you have any questions, please send them along and we will try to get to all of the questions that did not get answered. And Galina has just dropped her email into the chat. If you have any questions for her, you can reach out directly. So thank you all, and we will see you again next week. And we do post these on our website. So if you would like to catch up or catch some bill numbers that you did not get, you can go there for the recording. Thanks so much. See you next week.